Hello, good afternoon. Very good. Okay, if we all be seated and call to order, please. Jude, you want to stop talking? Okay. Okay. Uh, you. Okay. Welcome everyone to this afternoon. As you notice, Brent's not here today, so I'm chairing the meeting. We're going to change the format a little bit. We've got Dr. Bob doing the presentation today, and he wants to get away smartly, so we might have Bob give his presentation, and then we'll talk about other club business. So I'll give it all to you, Bob.
Oh, so that's it?
That's it?
I can go back.
No, you just...
No, because the people are looking at that. They don't want me to sit here.
Okay, is that working? Can you all hear me? Yep. Okay, guys, there's a couple of reasons why I'm going early today. It's not because I don't want to have a beer with you, but more about the fact that I've got about a 2-hour drive to get home. I'm in the process of retiring. We've got a block of land up in Maloney. It's just under 2 hours drive to get there, and I have Parkinson's, and my wife has had cataract surgery. So between the two of us, we're not a very good driving combination. So we want to try and get home while it's still a bit of light. So that's why I'm leaving early. This last month has been a month of lasts for me. Yesterday I gave my last lecture to vet students. A couple of weeks ago I did my last conference. I went up to Malaysia and spoke at a conference up there. And this is probably my last talk to a bird club. And I've been giving talks to bird clubs for the best part of 40 years. So I'll come back and talk about myself later, because that's only a 2-minute talk. We're going to talk about hand rearing today. I'm actually going to take you a little bit deeper into hand rearing. I'm going to be talking about parrot chicks in particular, and then we're going to move from that on to the effect that hand rearing has on them. So if I can make this thing work. Okay, so where are we, Benny? That's what we're talking about. So this is actually a talk I gave to an American conference, and I've just taken out some of the chunkier, more scientific bits out. But there's still a reasonably scientific-oriented approach to understanding parrots. But I know that you guys can handle that. And there's no blood and gore pictures in it, just lots of baby shots. Okay, so, and if you see my hand shaking, it's Parkinson's. I'm not scared of you. I'm not nervous. I can't stop shaking with my left hand, which makes it really hard to bird watch now because I can't hold the binoculars still. So just as well birds move a lot, so I can coincide my eye movement with them. Okay, we're going to be talking about how they normally develop, how these little guys develop and what things have an effect on them. And we're going to talk about hand rearing. And with the hand rearing talk, we're going to be hoping that we can understand, by understanding how these guys work, have a better understanding how disease and things like that can affect them. Okay, there are a few videos, and I've stolen them from YouTube, and I ran them through this morning, and they come complete with ads, so you'll have to forgive me for that. Okay, so when these guys hatch, they come out of the egg. It's incubation and hatching is a whole process in its own right, another talk, and it's a fascinating field to be a part of. But when these guys come out, most of our parrot chicks are covered with a little bit of down, or they're pretty well naked. And it depends on the species, really. I'd like to say it was a profitable thing to have no feathers, but eckies have lots of little feathers when they hatch. So, and they live in like that. We don't understand why some have down and others don't. What they have is very species specific. So this little green-winged macaw chick, just at 10 days of age, little cute guy. This is my mean baby photos. Okay, now their eyes are usually closed. Not all birds have their eyes closed, some have. Others have their eyes semi-open. One thing we're pretty sure about is that even though their eyes are closed, they can see. And they can see through the eyelids. And we think they can actually probably see while they're still inside the egg. And this is because the eyes are one of the first organs to develop in the embryo. and the skin of the eyelid is so thin, it's very easy for them to see through it. So we might say, oh yeah, their eyes are shut, they can't see. Well, no, their eyes are shut, but they can see. Okay, so closed at hatch, they probably can see, and generally the eyelids will open at around about 1 to 3 weeks, maybe up to 4 weeks of age, depending on the species. And a delay in the opening can often indicate that you've got a stunting problem. So eyes that don't open or don't open fully at the time that you would expect, that's a bit of a little alarm signal for you. And one of the things we do is make sure that we are writing all these things down. It's very easy for me when I'm looking at working up a clinical case to go and look at some data out of the Schubot Citiculture Centre over in Florida, or Brian Spear's book on macaws, and find all the normal weights and events that happen in the development of an embryo. When it comes to the Australian birds, it's just not there. There's no numbers, there's no records that people have kept, and I wish people would keep records because then we could collate them and get some averages. But we're probably another couple of generations away because my generation has stopped using pens because their hands shake too much and we're not very good on the computer. My son's generation is bloody hopeless writing. His handwriting hasn't improved since grade 7 and he's a lawyer now, and he just became a father the other day, but he's a whiz on a computer. So ears are the same. Your old wool species, which are your cockatoos, the Asiatic and Australian parrots, they pretty much have their ears closed or open. But the New World, the South American and the Eckies, they have their ears closed. Again, they can hear, and in fact, there's now studies showing that chicks in general, not just parrot chicks, but they can actually hear while they're in the egg, which is why they can recognise their parents when they're coming in to feed them. They've actually been able to see them and hear them even before they've opened their ears and their eyes. Okay, so hearing is pretty good with these little oaks. They have a yolk sac. When they're developing in the egg, they have this big yolk sac sitting outside the body, and it's supplied them with food. It's the yolk that you have in your fried egg, the yellow part. In the last trimester, the last third of incubation, what you'll have happen there is that that yolk sac is drawn into the body, and they live off that for the first couple of days. But you'll see a little umbilicus, just a little hole there, and that's an important thing to keep an eye on because most of the time it's closed by the time they hatch. If it's open, and that can be because your incubation temperatures and humidity aren't right, if it's still open, you can get infection tracking up there and you can get a yolk sac infection. So if you are dealing with chicks that have just hatched, always have a look at their tummy and see if the umbilicus looks closed. If you're not sure, just put a little dab of betadine cold sore ointment on it. Okay, when we used to do ostriches, we would put a band-aid on it, a little bit of cold sore ointment and a band-aid. Okay, so there's a little blue and gold macaw 5 days old, and that's not a healthy-looking yolk sac. That's be bothering me, and I'd be thinking, do I have to take this guy to surgery to remove a return sac? Yeah, this is one of these videos. So feeding these little guys, have you seen videos of macaws feeding their babies? I watched a video of hyacinths feeding babies. And it, you know, from the chick's perspective, it's got to be bloody scary. I'll see if I get this to work without an ad. Okay, so generally the hen feeds them for the first week, and then it's shared. Chicks beg for food, and the parents decide who needs the food. I'll see if I get this to go without an ad. Sorry. Now the other thing to note here, look at what she's doing now. She's moving nesting material around, she's touching it. It's a constant touch thing. These guys are always in physical contact with each other. Okay, so as a general rule, when you're looking at parrots with a very small clutch size, they'll have a long incubation period. the smaller the clutch, generally the larger the chicks, the longer the incubation will be. Okay, and those guys tend to have a prolonged nesting period, long incubation period, and a low protein diet compared to a little guy who makes a lot of eggs, lays a lot of eggs. They generally have a short incubation period and a short nesting period. Because they're growing so quickly, they have to have a higher protein diet. So budgerigars, for example, they have an 18-day incubation period, whereas black cockatoos are around about 28 days. So a much longer incubation period, and you're going to need a much higher protein diet for the little budgie because he's got a lot of work to do, rearing all those chicks. So there are differences between dietary requirements, even at an Australian level. Okay, so the next thing to think about is the growth rate of the chicks. How well do they grow? Now, the way their growth rate, which is days versus weight, that's basically determined by the chick's final body weight, what the adult weighs, by the metabolic rate of the bird, and by how much food they're getting. All of those things will affect the growth rate. Okay, and the weight and the age will vary between species, but when you put it into a graph, it just remains a constant. That's the blue and gold macaw graph, but I could plot a budgies and it would be exactly the same. Okay, the numbers would be different, but the graph itself would remain the same. So you see, initially you get this growth phase where they're really piling on the weight. Okay, and this goes generally up until around about the start of weaning. They're just continually gaining weight. Okay, once they get to the weaning age, they will go over a little bit of a peak, and then they'll start to drop down as they start getting less feeds but more food, as in they're eating by themselves, if that makes any sense. So this initial growth phase, this is important to keep in mind, because when I see sick chicks, people will often say to me, oh, but he's gaining weight. He's got to. That growth chart doesn't go down at all. Even if they're not getting the right amount, it will still continue to gain weight. It's the amount of weight that they're gaining expressed as a percentage of what it should be that is important. So what I like to do is to actually have a growth chart that tells me what the expected weight for that species is at that age. And then I'll work out, well, this chick weighs X amount, it should weigh this amount, so expressed as a percentage, is it going up every day or is it going down? And I have seen macaw chicks where their weight is going up, but the percent of expected weight has been going down, and those are very sick chicks. So don't get caught by thinking that just because a chick is growing and gaining weight, that that's okay. It's going to get bigger. Okay, you can't help that. You can't stop it. Well, you can, you just kill them. But if you don't kill them, they're going to get bigger. So you've got to look at what the percentage of the final weight, or what percentage of the expected weight is that you're dealing with. And this is why we need people to keep numbers. You know, cockatiels are probably the most commonly hand-reared bird in captivity today. How many reared cockatiels? Okay. Smart man. I mean, you look pretty good for a 90-year-old, because if you were hand-rearing them, you'd look 110. Well, this is the thing, is that hand-rearing is a really intensive thing to do. But they're so common to hand-rear, nobody's bothered to record the expected weight for cockatiels. We don't know what the expected weight for a cockatiel on day 21 is, because nobody's written it down. That's the sort of stuff that we need to write down. Okay, bones. Guy in the UK, Nigel Harcourt Brown, he's a brilliant surgeon and an even better illustrator. He worked this out. He breeds Pioneer parrots. And so he radiographed all of his chicks just to see how their bones were developing, and then drew sketches of them. So he's a pretty cool guy, not bad for an Englishman. Okay, one of the things we find out that the bone development initially is very sedentary. These guys are little pink blobs. They sit in the bottom of the nesting hollow, move around much. So they're not arcing their bones to do a lot. So consequently they develop very slowly, which is how nature intended them to be. So they grow and they develop. As they get heavier, the chick starts taking more weight on the bones, and the bones start to build up in their strength and their calcium structure, which makes sense, doesn't it? But what we get into is problems where people ask them to take weight too early. And that's when you're hand-rearing them, and you're hand-rearing them in an artificial environment, in particular lit room, lots of white light, in a container by itself, and it has to stand up to get it. And you saw those little chickens. That doesn't happen in the wild. We force them into that, and we ask them to take too much weight on their legs, and then we ask them to fly too early, and it doesn't work. Okay, so there's some of Nigel's drawings. So you can see the bones are very difficult to see, and that's because they haven't got much calcium in them at this age. The joints are difficult to see because there is no joint. This age is just a piece of cartilage. So it's still growing, it's still developing this bone, and you're going to ask them to stand up on it. Okay, so I'm just going to hold this here. When we look at this, this is an interesting little chart because it tells you what's happening. So the top row, you've got the time in the nest and then out of the nest. And the next one where you've got the climbing and then flapping. When they're flapping, the ulna is starting to grow. That's this bone here in the wing. Okay, and then they're starting to fly, develop better. Okay, and the pectoral girdle is the shoulder joints. That's all developing because we're asking them to fly. So they're still in the nest at that stage, just starting to flap within the nest. Okay, then we want them to stand and perhaps perch on one foot. So the bones in the legs are starting to develop. But the bones in the legs aren't developing earlier than the wings. The wings are developing first. Okay, and then your tarsometatarsals in sacrum, that's the pelvis, and the ankles develop the last. So what I'm trying to do, these bones develop in a particular order, and it's not necessarily the order that we ask them to take away from. We're asking them to stand up too soon. Okay, so feathers are another issue. When they hatch, they may or may not have down feathers. Around about 2 weeks of age, they get their first wave of down feathers coming through. Contour feathers start to come through. There's feathers on the body. Okay, and then after that, it depends on the species. Okay, generally on the shoulders and the wings, and the tail and the head. Okay, but by the time they're fledgling, they should have all their feathers. So we look at this, his newly hatched green wings, and just a little bit of fluffy down. Here he is, probably at around about 6 weeks of age. Okay, a little bit older, maybe 10 or 12 weeks. Okay, and fully fledged. So you can see how those fellows have to develop. When things are going, we get odd feathers. We get feathers going twists. We get feathers erupting when they shouldn't be erupting, or more commonly not erupting when they should be erupting. There are some charts out there that show us when these feathers should be erupting according to the species, but if you don't know the books, they're hard to find. It's not commonly available. You won't find it online, for example, on Thrive. Although I haven't tried AI with that yet. I'm playing with AI and I'm really enjoying it. But it gets it wrong. One of the things that it says AI may be wrong. AI is often wrong. Okay? But it's a damn sight quicker than trying to do a literature search yourself. Okay, thermoregulation. The smaller an animal it is, the harder it is for it to keep warm. And that's because when we look at the surface area of the skin, and we compare that to the body mass of the animal, the smaller they are, the larger the skin surface area is. So therefore they lose heat through their body very quickly. So the smaller they are, the larger that ratio is, the more heat they'll lose, and they also means that if they are very small, they have a very high metabolic rate. So they have to have a lot of energy to both grow and also to keep themselves warm. So thermogenesis, keeping yourself warm, can be difficult for these little guys. Okay, so if we look at them, they don't have enough feathers to insulate them. That's what the feathers are for. The feathers are just a big doona. You know, in winter, you probably don't, you live in Brisbane, up in Toowoomba and up in Maloney, you fluff your doona up and the feathers all trap warm air and keeps you nice and warm. And that's what feathers are there for on a parrot chick or a parrot in general. These guys, that's a sulphur-crested cockatoo, around about 4 weeks of age. He hasn't got enough feathers to keep himself warm. Okay. Fat. They don't have a lot of fat on them, these guys. You tend to think of these guys as little pudgy budgies, but they're they're actually not that fat. And there's two different types of fat. There's white fat, which acts as insulation, and brown fat, which generates heat itself just through its mitochondrial metabolism. They don't have much brown fat and they don't have much white fat. So they're not going to be able to use fat to keep them warm. They can't use feathers to keep them warm. Okay, so they're basically going to be reliant on their metabolic rate to keep themselves warm, and to get a good metabolic rate, it means you've got to have food going into them. Okay, now thermoregulation means cockatiel chicks, for example, are able to start keeping themselves warm as early as a week after hatch. Okay, but even by the time they're ready to fledge, they're only at 3/4 of what an adult can do. So all through their hand-rearing time, these guys are reliant on heat from somewhere else. And what do they rely on? High energy input, getting good quality food, and reduced energy expenditure. I should say under high energy input is going to be ambient temperature, keeping them warm. We don't want to overheat them, but they basically have to be kept warm until they're ready. Okay, and reduced energy expenditure. This little nest box full of Hans macaws. And they're not doing much, are they? That's what they're supposed to do. No, not much. Just lie there, conserve their energy, use the energy they've got for growing and for keeping themselves warm, okay, and relying on food going into them. So, peripheral vasoconstriction, in English that means that the blood vessels on the outer side of the body will constrict to push blood into the centre of the body if they're getting really cold. And so this is why when you see people who are cold, they look pale, because the blood vessels on the outer part of the body are closing down and sending blood into the middle to keep things like your heart, your brain and your liver working. Okay, they shiver. You will see birds shiver. Frequent feeds with a high energy food and heat-seeking behaviour. They're the two that we have a bit of control over. Okay, so the trouble is that they don't have, at this age, a really good means of controlling their body temperature by constricting those blood vessels. The ability is there, but the ability to do it is not so much. Okay. The other things to think about, the kidneys aren't very good. They're still growing. So these guys will take in a high liquid diet. They'll pee a lot. Who has hand-reared birds and wondered why they produce so much urine? Why the paper you're using is always soaking wet? And that is because their kidneys can't concentrate urine very well at this age. So they pee a lot. But they're actually peeing a lot, so therefore they need a lot of water. It's not the other way around. They're not peeing a lot because they're drinking so much. They're actually peeing a lot so they have to drink a lot to replace it. So it means you've got to make sure that you're supplying adequate amount of water in their diet. And I've seen people make up very thick hand-rearing formula and then wonder why these guys get kidney problems. That's because they're getting dehydrated. Okay, and what else is there? Oh, the digestive tract. It's just very quick. Food goes in one end and out the other end. It's constantly moving through. And when you have something that's as finely balanced as that, as delicate as that, it means if it gets into trouble, if it gets stressed, it's just going to stop working. And I call it ileus. Ileus means a paralysis, if you like, of the gastrointestinal tract. You would call it sour crop or crop stasis. Same thing, means exactly the same thing. But what it is we see crop stasis because the guts come to a halt. Why does the gut come to a halt? That's what we've got to find out. Because it's not just the food's too cold or the chick is cold. There's a whole range of different things that can cause it. Anything that makes the chick sick can cause crop stasis. Okay, now, the other thing is these little guys, they're not very good at breathing. Birds don't have a diaphragm. You and I got a diaphragm. It runs across here. It separates our belly from our chest. So when we're breathing, our lungs are going in and out in a vacuum. And down here doesn't affect it to a great deal. Because birds don't have a diaphragm, their lungs actually don't move. They sit up there along the back between the ribs and air just flows through them. There's no inwards and outwards movement. What they have is air sacs. And the way to think of air sacs is they're like plastic bags hanging off the back of the lungs. And when a bird breathes, the sternum goes down, the ribs go out. That creates an increase in the volume of the body, which gives you a vacuum and draws air through the lungs. Then when they breathe out, sternum up, ribs in, air out of the air sacs, back out through the lungs. Actually getting 2 goes at each breath of air. If you're a flying animal, that's a pretty handy thing. Gives you the maximum opportunity to get oxygen out of the air. So it's a good system, but when you see a parrot chick, they're basically a life support system for a stomach. They don't have a lot of room there in their belly now, so they can't expand that air sac much. The sternum is soft bone, the ribs are soft bone. They can't move them a great deal. That means that they will run into trouble if they get a respiratory problem, because they won't be able to increase their respiratory rate or volume to compensate for an inability to breathe properly. So we've got to be thinking aspiration pneumonia. What happens there? What's happening? Why is this chick running out of air so quickly? Okay, and then they don't have an immune system. Okay, these guys, your immune system, there's different parts to the immune system. There's what we call the innate immune system. Your skin is part of that. The lining of your respiratory tract, your stomach, that's all part of the innate system. It's got some antibodies in there that help to prevent disease from getting through. But then if something gets past those barriers, then it's got to be dealt with by white blood cells and lymphocytes, or your white cells, I should say. And they're going to attack the germ that gets into the body. These guys can't do that. They haven't learned how to produce antibodies yet, so they don't have any defence against disease, which means if they're exposed to an infectious agent, such as this polyomavirus, if they're exposed to a disease, they don't have the ability to fight infection. Now, you might think, oh, that sounds a bit strange. We have it too. Look at your kids and your grandkids. You know, who's had kids go to preschool and not get sick? It's virtually impossible, isn't it? Little swine, they go off, they pick up every bug there is, they come home and reinfect you. You were last infected when you were a kid at preschool, and now you're getting infected again. The little buggers. I love them, but I've got their little germ factories. So just keep this in mind. These guys don't have the ability to fight disease much. Yeah, they get some maternal immunity. In mammals, it comes from colostrum, the first milk. In parrots, it comes from the albumin they drink while they're in the egg, and from that egg yolk. That's where they get it from their mothers. If mum wasn't very well protected against disease, they're not going to be well protected. Okay, now think about this in the wild, because this is where everything goes really pear-shaped and hand-bearing. Parrot chicks are living in a nesting hollow. Okay, they're down deep in a tree trunk. I often have people come in. So these guys are actually robbing the nest and taking these chicks out. But that's another story. But in the general rule, parrot chicks are reared in a tightly confined, very warm, dark environment, and in most cases with siblings all around them. And when they don't have siblings all around them, they've certainly got their parents coming in to keep them warm and to feed them. So it's a life that is full of restricted movement. Okay, we don't want them to move much. They haven't got the strength and the muscles and the bones to do that with. Close physical contact, developing their social behaviours, and constant round-the-clock feeding. They've pretty much got everything they want. So that's typically how wild parrots grow. Galahs, for example, will sit in a nest hollow till they're about 9 weeks of age, and then after 9 weeks, they will start to fledge, but they're still not weaned. So they'll leave the nest, mum and dad will take them to a creche, to a nearby tree where other pairs are bringing their chicks. And that's where they learn all their social behaviours, and when they're finally weaned and are able to go and be independent. So that's what they look like at that age in the wild, but that's not quite what we see in captivity, is it? Benjamin? No, there it is. Okay, so... Sorry for the ad. I can't do anything without it. YouTube videos shoulder of the other. They're always touching each other. The parents are constantly touching them, not just feeding them. It's picking their skin, it's rubbing them, constantly stimulating them, but not encouraging them to move around a lot. So what happens in captivity? Okay, so here's another example. Okay, let's see if I get this one to run. No, that one. Is that going to run there? Yeah. Oh, there it is. got a very loud and commanding voice. 18 years in the infantry will do that to you. Does that work? So, yeah, the calcium levels for poultry food is around about 4 to 5% calcium. If you go over 0.5% in a budgie's food, you'll kill it. So don't add supplements to hand-rearing formulas. Okay. Now, typically, this is a sort of standard sort of routine that people like to get themselves into. Okay, those strange and sad people who feed from the egg hatching every 2 hours for a week. I like my sleep far too much. Yes, that's what I mean, very sad people. Okay, and then you go to every 4 hours and every 6 to 8 hours and then every 8 to 12 hours. That's a sort of standard sort of routine. The chicks don't understand that routine, and nor do the parents. That's not what they do. They feed on demand. Okay, so this is something we've got to start thinking about. New approach to hand rearing. Now, this is a good theory, and I'll be the first to tell you that if you have a life, this probably is not going to work for you. Okay, but the new approach is to think about, should we wake up a sleeping chick just to give him a feed? Maybe wait till he wakes up and he's hungry and has a good feed. Okay, do we feed them on a schedule or on their needs? So this is all good in theory, isn't it? You know, I'm not going to feed him until he wakes up. What happens if he wakes up at 1 o'clock in the morning, or you've got to go to work and he wakes up? Yeah, you've got to have the ability, the flexibility in your life to be able to manage that. But a few of my clients have done this, and they report much happier chicks, much better growth rates. And if you hand rear macaws, you know you get a lot of regurgitation with them. That regurgitation problem disappears. So there is a solution to it. It's just the solution probably doesn't fit in with our lives. But just be aware, if you can change your life, that might be a good way to go. If you can change. Yeah. Yeah. I did say it wasn't very practical. We waited for you. No, we didn't. We started without you, sorry. Okay, so feeding them on demand might be better for their physical and behavioural growth. And we are getting much better results with it. But again, great theory. It works in practice. Very difficult to do in a real world. So, but just keep that under your belt, not under your belt, but keep it in your little back of your mind that this is something, if I'm having problems, maybe I could try this approach. Okay, and how do you feed them? You can feed them with a syringe. You get this little head bobbing. If you haven't reared chicks before, when they get that feeding response, they've closed off their glottis, so they can't inhale food. So you can just, I had a nurse who can put 20 mils into a macaw chick in about 3 seconds. As soon as she gets a feeding response, she whacks, she hits it, and the food just goes straight in. My hands aren't that fast. But you'll get a little bit of spillage like this, but you're trying to stimulate a feeding response. Now, the problem is that some chicks, when they're not well, they lose that feeding response, and some chicks just get so much food, they just feel lazy and they just can't be bothered getting a feeding response. So if you need to feed them, the crop might be empty or you've got to go to work or whatever, then you might need to think about using other things like a spoon. Better Farm makes these. I think these are quite clever because it's a spoon and you can measure how much food you're actually giving. So the spoon actually fits onto the syringe. So you're not just dipping a spoon into a cup of formula and hoping you're getting 5 mils in every spoonful. You can actually measure it. But a spoon feeding can be quite useful. And a lot of times we have to resort to a feeding tube. And these are dangerous. Okay, if you haven't killed a bird hand tube feeding it, you're either lying to me or you haven't done many, only 1 or 2. 3 ways that you can kill a bird with a crop tube. One is to put the crop tube straight down their windpipe, fill their lungs with hand-rearing formula. Second is to put the crop needle just at the back of the throat. So that when you start to feed it, it comes all back up and they breathe it in. And the third is to put the crop needle down into the right place. The chick gets a feeding response and it goes straight through the crop. You've done this. If you haven't done this, you haven't lived. I've done all of these. Experience is learning from your mistakes. I've had lots of experience. Good experience is learning from other people's mistakes. So please don't do this. The one thing this has in these 3 causes of death have in common is that the chicks the hen rearer was in a hurry. They were impatient. So they didn't take time to make sure the crop needle was in the right place. They didn't check it to make sure it was okay. They didn't gently restrain the chick to stop it lunging up against you. Okay, let's quickly whack it in and get going because, you know, the pub's open in 10 minutes. So this is where these guys die because of our lack of patience. Okay, behaviour. We want to try and replicate that wild environment. Again, I'll come back to saying that again. Our nurseries should be warm, dark, quiet, minimal stimulation, but make sure that these guys have got siblings around them so they get physical comfort, if you like, rather than stimulation from the presence of another bird near them. Okay, so socialisation is really important. If you're doing this and you haven't got those siblings, then hey, that's your job then. You take on the job of that macaw hen, nibbling and chewing at her chicks and massaging them and rubbing them. And you talk about people, you'll hear people writing about how they're hand-rearing their birds and they're patting them and massaging them all the time, and you think you're weird. In actual fact, they're doing a really good thing. Who's the guy who writes for Birdkeeper, the Yank over in Hawaii? E.B. Craven. I love that guy. With Parkinson's, you lose your memory, so I can never remember that guy's name. But he talks about the importance of contact and physical interaction and knowing your birds. And I just think, you know, I've learned so much from reading his articles in Birdkeeper, more knowledge than he thinks he's imparted, I think. But that massage and touching, that becomes us. Environmental enrichment, not at this stage. You know, if they're really little, you don't want to give them toys to play with. That'll come when they get a bit older. It's important later, but at this moment, environmental enrichment for them is social enrichment. Being with a person, being with a bird. Not necessarily interacting and talking to them, but just being there and touching them. Okay, so this is one of Eb Craven's ideas. Handling the chicks. What he was saying in one of his articles was that he lets the parents rear the chicks, but every afternoon he takes the clutch of chicks inside and he gives them a feed and they talk to them and they play with them and then they put them back out in the nest box. And his birds are so well socialised that they'll accept those chicks back again. But those chicks grow up knowing that they are birds and they're comfortable being around people. So that's a good outcome for hand rearing. Much better than rearing from day one.
I haven't done it for years, but I did have to do it.
But it put 20 years on you.
It did. I'm really only 40.
Okay, now fledging. Fledging is when they're leaving the nest, but they're not yet ready to stop being fed. So it's not weaning. So this is where in the wild they're just sort of coming to the entrance of the hollow and taking a few tentative flights. But this is why you see wild galahs feeding their chicks in the trees, because they have fledged but not yet weaned. Okay, so this is not too stressful a time for us. They're getting an increased interest in the world outside, so they're starting to stand up and look around. That's okay, their bones are strong enough now, they can actually stand up. Okay, they like to look out of the container. They might climb onto the edge of the container and take a little flight. Again, that's okay if you've reared them properly and they have the right amount of strength in their bones and their muscles. That shouldn't be a disaster. What I see in aviaries is birds where the parents have been fed nothing but seed. The chicks come out of their nest, they take their first flight, they get on the edge of the nesting hollow, they launch themselves into space, flap their wings, break both of them, just from the weight of the feathers, and then hit the ground and break their legs. That's a common thing that I see. Okay, and that comes back to the parents' diet did that to the chick. Okay, so we've got to make sure that we're not doing that. They're flapping their wings a lot. On a hot summer's day, there's nothing better than hand-rearing bird chicks at this age because they keep you cool. They keep flapping their wings. It's great. I'll just stand here and I'll get a bit more breeze. Wing trimming, don't do it. It's a really bad thing to do. Okay, if you have to trim their wings, my rule is that you don't trim a bird's wings until it's learned how to fly. I base this on the airport movies. I am very, very confident that I could fly a 747. I have seen all of the airport movies. I know that everybody can fly a 747. All you have to do is get onto traffic control and they'll tell you how to do it. Flying high is also, that's the ultimate. It's the landing thing that's a bit tricky. And with chicks where their wings have been trimmed, they don't hurt themselves flying, they hurt themselves landing. That's because they're not landing, they're actually crashing. So we don't trim wings until they know how to fly and they know how to land. And there's very, very good arguments against trimming them at all. Okay, people say, oh, but he'll fly away. Well, not if you close the windows. Oh, he'll fly into the window. Not if you draw the curtains. Okay, it's child-proofing your house. 101, you've got to look after the chicks. Oh no, you don't want to. Dogs and cats are outside, so are the kids. Can't remember what this one is. Oh, another ad. This guy keeps appearing in ads lately. Have you seen it? Yeah. I watch. Again, Parkinson's. You have a 30-second attention span, so I watch the shorts on YouTube a lot. Hang on. I thought I could skip that. Okay. Anyway, that's a chick learning how to fly. Oh, here we go. Very American, this one. But that's not a very strong, confident flight, is it? That chick's really just learning how to fly. So they're not born with this ability to soar around the house and avoid the ceiling fan and not go out the window. You have to teach them to fly. And that's what this video is doing. She's teaching these green cheeks how to fly, how to develop their confidence. And you can't do that if you've trimmed their wings. Weaning them is the bit that everybody hates. It's a very stressful time for the birds and for the people who are hand rearing them, which is why you see so many people selling chicks that have been hand reared and they haven't been weaned, because he'll bond better to you if you finish off his hand rearing. This translates to, I've done this once, I'm not doing it again. It's too stressful for me, you can do it yourself. And so they'll take a complete novice and tell them to hand rear and collect this parrot and wean it. What could possibly go wrong? My bank manager thanks them. There's always money going into the account because of that sort of behaviour. Okay, so they will lose weight. That's normal. Remember that growth curve? Growth curve goes up and then it comes down. Okay, so it's normal for them to be losing some weight at the time of weaning. If they lose more than 10%, you've got a problem. Okay, but otherwise, expect a little bit of a weight loss. They're basically, as they learn to fly, they're building up that muscular strength, losing a little bit of fat and putting on muscle. So they get a little bit lighter and a little bit fitter and leaner. Okay, they'll often start refusing feeds. They're just not hungry. Okay, you gave them enough this morning and they're starting to regulate their energy intake to their requirements, and they're not having the energy requirements that they need as adults. Macaws regurgitate all the bloody time. I don't know the answer to this. They just do it all the time. Sometimes it's an infection. I think sometimes it's not an infection. Sometimes it's the formula. Most times I think it's not. I think it's because we're not feeding them properly. Okay, flight is going on. That's always stressful. And it takes time. You cannot rush these things. There are people out there who crash wean these birds. They make them eat solids right from the get-go. And those chicks quite often will revert back to hand-rearing behaviour when they're in a new home. Particularly I see this in blue and gold macaws and red-tailed black cockatoos. They will start begging for food, doing that groaning noise, looking for a feed, and the new owner doesn't know what the hell's going on. This is their first bird. And this chick's reverted back to hand feeding behaviour because he's stressed and doesn't know how to eat because he was crash weaned.
Years ago, Bob, there used to be a problem with the cockatiels in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Years ago, and people are having trouble really because they're bought these hand-fed birds and they're not eating, they're deteriorating.
Yeah.
People sell them in the market,
Well, it was one of the reasons why they stopped selling birds at markets, because these unweaned chicks were being sold as fully weaned. So, yeah, I'm not really keen on seeing chicks at the Sunday market. Again, my bank manager loves it when they're there, because they're all sick. I saw one lady sold another lady a cockatiel at a Sunday market and brought it to me because it wasn't walking. Had a broken leg. I see that all the time. Make sure you give them a good range of food, different types of things. Don't feed them just on pellets and don't feed them just on seed. A little bit of everything, everything in its own right. And this is the last slide. If I can get this one to work without an ad.
Sort of age canary.
I'm not sure. It's basically it's a YouTube. I don't know how to skip, so
At least it's short ads, it doesn't matter.
yeah, a little But see, that's a pretty good. I don't like the seed in it, but I don't own them, and some people may well think that that's what they need is seed. But at least these chicks will know how to eat everything, so it'll be easy to manipulate their diet as they get a bit older. Oh, yeah, sorry? Yeah. There's more than one way to skin a cat. That's what I teach my students, or used to teach my students, that sit back and watch and don't judge until you've seen the results. On the rifle range, we used to say that you don't correct the shooter's position until you've looked at his score. Okay, so that's my hand rearing. Might be a little different from what other people will tell you, but there's a tremendous amount of information out there for you, but it's not necessarily in the veterinary literature. There's a lot of this stuff about incubation and breeding and so forth in the ornithological literature. So there's a ton of stuff out there we don't access. It's there, but we don't look it up enough. And there's a lot of behavioural information, but there's also a lot of behavioural misinformation coming out. And I would remind you that the plural of anecdote is not fact. Just because somebody said it 5 times doesn't make it true. And always be careful of what you read on a forum.
Can I just go way back to the beginning, and you know how you were saying that when we were hand rearing and the babies, they do stand up, and
Yeah.
you know, and they seem strong. And has it been researched now to say that
That you shouldn't get them to stand
that
up.
it has it been proven that we have been breaking the bones or deforming the
they-
bones?
It's one of the causes of what we call bowed legs. Where
Right.
the tibiotarsus, which is the bone between the knee and the ankle, it bends outwards like a shearer. And that's
Yeah.
because they're trying to stand up too early and the bones aren't strong enough and the bones start to bend as a consequence.
So have you seen an improvement when now people are a bit more educated?
I've seen less of it. The legs themselves don't improve. I've got to fix those surgically.
Oh
actually
yeah,
have
no,
to
I
break
mean
them and-
with the babies coming out, like
Yeah.
you know.
As people start
Overall.
using less stimulation, more quiet, not asking them to stand up too
Yeah.
soon, we're seeing a lot of these orthopaedic problems going away.
Okay, good. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was taught back in the 1970s to go from the right hand down
Yeah.
through the crop, but feel the tube down the crop.
Yeah,
If you can't feel it, you know you've got it down the trachea.
when I'm crop feeding a bird, because I'm left-handed, I hold them in my left hand and I sit them on my shelf.
Yeah.
God gave me a shelf because he likes bird vets. So I sit them there and it's my right, so the bird's left. And I put the crop needle in on my right-hand side, pass it across the back of the mouth and let it slide down the pharynx and into the crop. And I'll feel it under my thumb because I'm using my